Thank you for being with us. Basically, Ido will speak for a few minutes at the beginning, gives a little brief overview of what's going on in Israel and in the Middle East. Also what's going on in America, political, American field, and how it affects what's going on in Israel and the Middle East. And then really open it for questions. This is a chance for you to ask anything you want, no limits, on any topic, and Ido is a great guy to answer the questions. As you know, Ido is the longest serving Israeli Consul General in New York City. Also was the Israeli General Consul in Los Angeles. I will also say that he has been a friend and a colleague for, almost 30 years, businessman, a professor. He created the brand Israel a long time before even we realized how badly Israel needs PR, and we're really excited for him to take the time and be with us for 5 times. This is one of 5 sessions. So again, thank you for being with us. We're also going to start every session with one of our rabbis of Temple Emanu-El, saying a few words and maybe sharing a prayer with us. We thought it would be a wonderful opportunity since we are all here in person. Rabbi Reines is with us tonight for the first session. Please welcome her, and then Ido Aharoni. Thank you for coming.
Our prayers are always fervent, but so much more so at this time. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessing for the state of Israel, land of our beginnings and our destiny, and for all your children who dwell there, people of all faiths from every corner of the earth. Matir asurim, freer of the captives, swiftly and safely return all the kidnapped to their homes, restoring them and their loved ones toward wholeness. May there be an end to the spilling of innocent blood, to souls sullied by ruthless acts. Kadosh Baruch Hu, holy and blessed one, guide Israel's leaders to act with wisdom and courage, unwavering in their pursuit of peace. Protect those who defend the land, ensuring their safety as they strive to ensure the safety of others. Ba'al Harachamim, Master of compassion, help us hold the heartache of the Jewish people while holding the dignity of the Palestinian people. May all of Israel's inhabitants respect the humanity of each other. Makor HaChaim, source of life, help us fulfill the vision of your prophets of old. As we read in Tanakh, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war. And help us to fulfill the vision of your prophets of our age, as stated in the Declaration of Independence. The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisaged by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Adonai Echad, singular God of many names, spread over us your shelter of peace. And together let us say, Amen. May it be so. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Aharoni.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
This is such a wonderful prayer and a wonderful way to start the day and the event, and I see many people here in the room. Let me begin with a few general remarks. We are here to discuss the situation in Israel. There's always some situation going on ever since I can recall. I've been involved than the usual persons in Israel's affairs since I joined the Israeli Foreign Service in 1991. But even before that, I was very much interested, and I studied the situation, read a lot about it, met with people, discussed it. So I think I have a little bit of perspective about where we are. And obviously the one element that dominates the conversation about Israel today is the return of Donald Trump to the White House as the 47th President of the United States. The big question that is on your mind, I'm sure, is what does it mean for Israel and the region? So the first thing that we need to find out for ourselves is what do we know about Donald Trump and his foreign policy? What do we know about the way he sees the world? All right, so we know several things. First thing that we know is that he sees himself as a deal maker. So his foreign policy is not necessarily going to be a byproduct of some philosophy or some deep thinking, but rather a ad hoc configuration that presents a good deal. And there's plenty of evidence that this is the way he sees things. His remarks about the fall of Syria, for example, he said that Erdogan was able to take Syria for very little. So in his mind, the way you do deals, what's a good deal is that you buy low and you sell high. And that's the way they view deals in the world of business. And we have here a great friend of mine who's a great business success, famous fashion designer Elie Tahari, and he will tell you that that's the secret for good business. You buy low and you sell high. So the first thing we know about it. The second thing we know about his worldview is that it's very transactional. It's very personal. The world is divided into two groups, winners versus losers. The winners are the people that were able to show success in whatever field they're can be in politics, can be in military. But the world is divided into winners and losers. The relationship is transactional, not to say instrumental. There are no personal feelings. And that's the way he sees the world. A good example for that was the Abraham Accords. That was 100% the initiative and the execution and the implementation of the Trump administration when he served as the 45th president. And he deserves a lot of credit for it because they still hold, despite 10/7, despite of what happened at the aftermath of 10/7. So when Donald Trump re-enters the White House and he's looking at the world and he sees three big potential bundles of problems. Russia, Ukraine, highly complex. China, Taiwan, right now it's on the back burner, but it could escalate very quickly. And then, of course, Israel, Palestinians / Arabs. When he looks at those three bundles, those three areas, and he asks himself, where do I have the most immediate, most effective leverage? The answer is, of course, Israel. Why does he have leverage over Israel more than any other country? Because Israel is dependent upon the United States, diplomatically, militarily, and I would say also economically. For example, our munition economy is close to 100% dependent upon the Americans. The Americans sell Israel most of the ammunition that Israel needs. And so he has leverage over Israel. And knowing him as a deal maker, he will be interested in presenting what he calls a mega deal. What would be the mega deal? The mega deal would involve the end of the hostilities in Gaza. It's already happening, or at least the first phase of the ceasefire is in its initial stages of implementation. The release of the hostages, again, the process started. Let's hope it will continue. The third element of that deal will be some sort of an agreement over the rebuilding of Gaza. And here, I'm sure that Trump will be interested in getting the Palestinian Authority involved, which is something that the current Israeli coalition in Israel will not have an easier time accepting. And the fourth element would be normalization with the Saudis. We already know that the Saudis are demanding that part of their consent to have normalization with Israel, they want to see some sort of a political horizon for the Palestinians. Again, another element that will be very difficult for the current Israeli coalition to accept. And lastly, a new Iran deal. I don't think that Donald Trump, he already said he's not interested in starting new wars, he's interested in ending wars. I don't think that he will be interested in attacking Iran's nuclear facilities, certainly not directly by the Americans, but I don't think he will even let Israel do it. Not that I think that Israel can do it. I don't think Israel has the capacity of completely destroying the Iranian nuclear program. I wouldn't advise them to do it because it would, there's a real danger that it would produce the exact opposite result. But these are the 5 elements of Donald Trump's apparent mega deal. Will the Israeli government be able to accept it? Not the current coalition. There's always a scenario that the Israeli opposition will provide the coalition with a safety net, meaning they will not vote to bring them down if they will promote some sort of resolution. So that's where we are in terms of what can we expect from Donald Trump. I think that his idea that he is there, and he made it very clear in his inauguration speech that he wants to be remembered as the person who brings peace, who ends war. And I think that he was very serious, and he will do whatever it takes with no sentiments, with no emotions. That's my feeling. So that's on the Trump issue. Now, I was asked several questions already by people that are watching us from home, and I'd like to share them with you and try to answer them, and then we'll take the questions of the people here on the floor. So Henry is asking, is there any chance the government will fall soon? So I don't know if Henry is asking this as, because he wants them to fall soon or not, but let me give you some background about the Israeli political system. So unlike the United States, we don't have a presidential system, which means we don't have term limits, for example. In Israel, you vote for a political party. You don't vote for a person. When people vote for Netanyahu, they don't vote for Netanyahu, the person, they vote for his party called Likud. And after they collect all the results, the party that has more votes than others and is in the best position to form a coalition, which means is able to recruit 60 plus seats in the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament of 120 seats, that person, that party, has the right to build a coalition. The coalition is a legal agreement between parties. And you can have as many as 10, 15 members of your coalition. It doesn't matter. The parties can be tiny factions. They can be very large. Back in the day, we used to have, when Yitzhak Rabin was, when he won the elections, when the Labor Party won the elections versus Shamir-led Likud, each party had close to 50 seats. Today, political parties in Israel can only dream about 50 seats. If they get 30, they're lucky. And the fragmentation of Israel's political system is a big challenge. One dramatic fundamental difference between Israel and the United States, because of this structure of Israeli political system, the gravitation in Israel is towards the center. In the United States, the gravitation is towards the extremes. It's a huge difference. Your political system is highly polarized. Nobody wants to be in the center. The way you gain more votes and more attention is by going to the extreme. In Israel, it's exactly the opposite. Everybody wants to occupy the center because that's where the votes are. And so it's a big, big, big difference. The current coalition initially won 64 seats. When 10-7 happened, the coalition had 64 seats. Then several seats were added when a faction led by Gideon Sa'ar, I won't bore you with the details, joined the coalition, so they became 68. Now Ben Gvir, who's a member of the far-right party Jewish Power, Otzma Yehudit, resigned in protest of the deal that was signed with Hamas. So now they're back to 62. So they're still intact, and the reason why they're intact, and I don't think they will fall anytime soon unless Donald Trump will present his deal, The reason is because the members of the coalition see the public opinion surveys. The public opinion surveys, all of them indicate that the public wants a different government. So what keeps them together, the glue that keeps them together, is the fear that they will not be reelected. They will not be returning to the Israeli parliament. And I think that that's the main reason why I don't think that this government will fall soon, unless, again, Donald Trump will introduce his ambitious deal that includes normalization with Saudi Arabia. And you have to understand, today in the Arab world, Saudi Arabia is the Holy Grail. Why? First of all, it is being led by a strategic leader. And by a strategic leader, I mean a person who's not looking at where Saudi Arabia is going to be 5 years from now. He's looking at where Saudi Arabia is going to be 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And he knows. And again, I have here my dear friend Stuart Seldowich, a former senior American diplomat, who is a Middle East expert, and I'm honored that you're here, Stuart. I'm very happy to see you. Stuart dealt with Afghanistan mostly in his career. But I'm sure you would agree with me that Saudi Arabia is looking at the big picture, realizing that their oil reserves are going to deplete at one point, and they need to shift and transition their economy from oil-based economy, meaning an economy that is based on natural resources, to knowledge-based economy. Knowledge-based economy is the American economy, for example, the Israeli economy. It's the economy that is based on the ability to produce knowledge that matters. I'll give you an example, which I gave my students only last week. So I looked at what was the average life expectancy in the year 1800 globally. Was 33. The average person globally, in the United States was maybe higher, but on average, in the year 1800, the average person lived to be 33. What is the life expectancy today globally? 73. In the United States, it's 79. In Israel, by the way, it's 82. So you want 3 more years, move to Israel. In my lifetime, global population tripled. In my lifetime. I was born in 1962. They went from 2.5 billion when I was born to 7.5 billion today. And they're projected to be 10 billion by 2050. I don't know if I'll make it to 2050, but my kids, certainly in my kids' lifetime, global population will be 10 billion. So global population quadrupled almost in 150 years. And the question is, why did it happen? And the knowledge that made it possible, where did it come from? Think about it. I'm teaching at UCSD and I tell my students, look out the window. You see that name, Jonas Salk, the Salk Institute? That's the guy that invented the polio vaccine. And right next to it, you have an institution that worked on producing the HIV cocktail and the hepatitis C vaccine and it goes on and on and on. Most of that knowledge came from the United States. So if you're looking for a reason why the United States is a world leader, it's not because you have the largest military in the world, and you do. It's not because you have the largest economy in the world, and you do. It's mainly because the United States is producing the knowledge that matters. COVID-19 vaccine, bang, came from here. 3 American companies produced the vaccine. Not 1, 3. It was interesting. My students had no idea who Jonas Salk was. And more interesting, they felt, some of them, uncomfortable when I was praising the United States, which bothered me as an Israeli. I'm not an Israeli and I'm not an American citizen, but it bothers me when Americans cannot hear someone praising their country. It really bothers me as a father of American children and American grandchildren. But we can talk about that later. So I hope I answered Henry's question about why the government will not fall soon. And of course, the reason why we don't have term limits is because, according to the Israeli law, new elections are held when the Knesset dissolves and the government loses majority. There are several ways to bring about elections, but usually, while the term is 4 years, very few governments actually made it. The average lifespan of Israeli coalition is 2.5 years. And when you look from 1948 until today, and the governments dissolve, you can't really put term limits because of the structure of the political system. All right, Lester is asking, the information reported to the public about delicate situations is generally only the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Is that the case with Gaza and Lebanon? All right. Well, the answer to that question is that despite of the subjective feeling that we may have that we don't really get all the information, and we live in a world that is far more transparent than in the past. The distance that defined the relationship between us and our elected officials vanished for the most part. Think about it. How many Americans knew that FDR was a disabled person? Very few. Because his image was controlled by the White House. And every time a picture was sent out to the public, he was standing, delivering a speech. We rarely saw him, I wasn't alive then, but we rarely saw him in a wheelchair. That is not possible today. In fact, today we have more information that we'd like to have about our elected officials. In many ways, that disappearance of the distance, what I call the demystification of the relationship between us and our political leaders, is the source of the new political charisma. The new political charisma is about reflexivity, authenticity, or at least perceived authenticity, and the ability to be impulsive. These are the politicians that get our attention today, which is exactly the opposite of what we remember from the past, or at least in second half of the 20th century. So I don't think that big stories can be kept a secret anymore. I think if something is happening in Gaza or in Lebanon, sooner or later we will know about it. The best example is the story about the pagers. Although it was never acknowledged by the Israeli government, think about how much information you already have about the pagers. Right? We all know, we all read somewhere, that the reason why Israel did it in that particular timing is because there was a fear that the Hezbollah people will know that the pagers were doctored, that were played with. Right? Nobody said it to us formally, but we all know it. Right? And I can go on and give you many, many examples of things that are accessible to us today that would not have been accessible to us 50 years ago. Another question from Lester, is there any real possibility that Hamas will ultimately put the interests of the Palestinian people at the top of its agenda? Personally, I don't think it will happen. And this is a great opportunity to say a word about radical Islamism. So what is radical Islamism? It's the deployment and the cynical usage of Islam, a religion, to gain political goals. When you read the Hamas Charter, and I urge all of you to go online and Google it up and read it. It's very, very important to read the Hamas Charter, which is something that we failed to do on 10/7. The reason why 10/7 happened is because we forgot to read the Hamas Charter. And what does Hamas Charter say? So the first thing you'll notice when you read the Hamas Charter is it's all about the past. It's not about the future. It's all about the past. And the reason it's all about the past is because Hamas, just like Boko Haram, just like Al-Qaeda, just like ISIS, just like Hezbollah, is about control. It's about control. It's not about religion, certainly not about spiritual beliefs. It's about control, in particular controlling women. Why Boko Haram abducted 300 girls and not 300 boys? Why Hamas chose to upload the horrible images of them raping Israeli women on 10/7? What is it that bothers them? What is the big threat? The big threat is modernity. Modernity means freedom. Modernity means the freedom to ask questions, to challenge authority. These are the things they don't want to see. So they fight modernity as the enemy, and this is what you see. When they took over Gaza in January of 2006, at the urging of the George W. Bush administration, they even sent the late Jimmy Carter to be the supervisor of the elections. They won by 45% of the votes. Fatah, which is the Palestinian, the rival faction, won 41% of the votes. What was the first thing Hamas did when they won the elections in Gaza? They butchered the Fatah rivals. The same images that you saw on 10/7, you could have seen Hamas doing to their own Palestinian brothers. I even remember seeing videos of them pushing people off rooftops in Gaza. Palestinians killing Palestinians. You didn't read about that in the New York Times. There's a reason. It doesn't fit the narrative. They killed thousands of Palestinians. Kicked them out of Gaza. Why? Control. The story is control. Control over money. Control over human resources. Control. That's the story. It has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with the future of the Palestinian people. If Hamas wanted to create a better future for the Palestinians, what could have been a better opportunity than Israel's complete pullout of Gaza in August of 2005? Think about it. Ariel Sharon, right? The unlikely person to do that. He's handing over the key to Gaza. He's telling the Palestinians, here, you say you want territory? Here's the territory. Until the last square inch, it's all yours, Gaza. Turn it into the Singapore of the Middle East. And of course, we all know what they did. They turned Gaza into the largest armament depot in the Middle East, only to later be surpassed by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. But at that point, the web of tunnels that they built, they used all the generous funding that came in from Qatar not to build a better future for the Palestinians, but to fortify their military apparatus on the ground. That's why it took Israel such a long time to cripple Hamas of its military abilities in Gaza. In very difficult conditions. When you engage in urban warfare, it's the most difficult kind of warfare that you can imagine. So, is there any possibility that Hamas will become all of a sudden interested in a better future for the Palestinians? Only if it serves its purpose. When Hamas was founded in the early days of the First Intifada broke out in Gaza, in Jabalia, in December of 1987. Believe it or not, both the Israelis and the Americans were in favor of Hamas. Why? Because Hamas started building educational schools, educational institutions, started providing food, meals to ordinary Palestinians, and they were viewed as a positive actor because they seemed like they care about the Palestinian people. But very quickly, once the bureaucracy grew and funding started to come in, and they built a military arm, and the military arm became the main thing. And all the rest of the agendas were basically neglected. So very quickly, Israel and the United States went from favoring Hamas to viewing Hamas as the problem and not the solution to the problem. I don't think when you look at the current leadership of Hamas that we have any reason to be hopeful that Hamas will change its agenda. And I will say one more thing about Hamas. Hamas is right now hurt in a very big way. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to recuperate. Here's my prediction. Once the first stage of the ceasefire agreement, the hostage deal, is fully implemented, remember this, and next month when I'm here, tell me if I was right or I was wrong. Hamas or Islamic Jihad, which is a sister organization in Gaza, will immediately begin shelling rockets again. Immediately. So we have 42 days. By day 43, there'll be rockets. It's always been like that with them. And there are many reasons for it, but I can explain. All right. Oscar is asking, was it wise to jeopardize the future security of millions of Israelis by pausing the war against Hamas for the release of live and dead hostages? All right. So first of all, yes, and I'll explain why it was wise. It's more than wise. It's essential for Israel's future. Let me explain. Every society has its DNA, the national ethos. What is the national ethos of the American society? The American dream. What is the American dream? It's a very compelling story. The story goes like this. If you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to be a law-abiding citizen, if you're willing to pay your taxes, the sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. You don't believe me? Ask Barack Obama. Look where he came from. Ask Bill Clinton. Ask Donald Trump. Did they ever think they could become president? Never in a million years. Yet, here they are. Everything and anything is possible in America. That's the oil that runs your machine. It's extremely powerful. What's the national ethos of the Israelis? What is the story the Israelis tell themselves about themselves? If you understand that national ethos, you understand why it was essential to release the hostages, and reckless to ignore them. The national ethos of Israel says, never again. What does it mean, never again? Ben-Gurion said it beautifully. That the scenario of killing Jews with impunity doesn't exist anymore. When David Ben-Gurion is, and you have to appreciate the genius of that man. We had a whole program right here at the Streicker Center about Ben-Gurion with his grandson, with Alon Ben-Gurion. I remember that. It was right before COVID. And Gadi produced it, and we had a full house. The genius of Ben-Gurion was, he saw how World War II ended, and he wrote a mental note to himself. That's what we need. We need nuclear military capabilities. Now, the year is 1945. Ben-Gurion is not even the first prime minister of Israel, right? He's the leader of the Zionist movement. He's the head of the Jewish agency, in fact. And he doesn't know that 3 years' time, he will become the first prime minister. But once he becomes the first prime minister, he begins diligently to work on the plan, on the ambitious plan. I want you to understand something. Israel was poor. We had nothing. We had no industry. We had no money. Yet he was fantasizing about nuclear weapons because he wanted to make sure that never again becomes an operational reality. And at that same time, he gave a speech. When I joined the Israeli army, the words from that speech were on a big sign in the military base. And I'm sure, Eli, you'll remember that too. In that speech, he said, Teda kol em ivriya. Every Hebrew mother, he meant to say Jewish mother, Israeli mother, will know that when you send your son or your daughter to the Israeli army, they are in good hands. And if God forbid, if something happens to them, we will do our utmost to take care of them. Not only them, Jews all over the world. The raid on Entebbe in 1976 in Uganda was designed and implemented to rescue hostages, that the vast majority of them were not Israeli. Vast majority of them were Jews. Right? That's part. So what is the national ethos? Solidarity. That's the glue that keeps Israeli society together. The day of 10/7, my son was called on October 8th to the reserves. His unit, and my son is not in any elite unit or anything that you read about in the paper, is just an ordinary soldier. 150% turnout. 150%, meaning 50% more than what the army had expected showed up. People left everything. He has a childhood friend that was climbing the mountains in Africa with his dad. He dropped everything, flew back to fight. And many of them were killed. So the idea of making any kind of political, petty, small political consideration, to put that consideration before the need to release the hostages, you're messing with the DNA of Israeli society. Dangerous. It's a slippery slope. Why is it a slippery slope? Because all it takes today in Israel to avoid military service is to go to a psychiatrist and say, I'm having suicidal thoughts. That's it. You get a letter right there on the spot. And when the younger people in Israel will feel that the trust between the people that send them to the battlefield and the young people that are being asked to sacrifice, when that trust is eroded, it's a very short distance from that to that meeting with the psychiatrist. And there are many people that did that. I know some people that did that went to a psychiatrist and got out of it. Because they say, well, if God forbid something happens to me, and they're not going to do anything? They're going to play politics? They're going to play politics? Are you serious? I'm going to risk my life for a bunch of politicians? It's a huge difference between that and statesmen. Yeah, people follow statesmen. People follow leaders that have vision. People have very difficult time following petty politicians. Huge difference. And we have this guy, Ben-Gvir, who's actually is proud of the fact that he derailed previous attempts to reach a hostage deal. I say to you, we're in a synagogue. It's not Jewish what he's doing. It's the opposite of being Jewish. So, I think it was wise, and I don't think that we're going to jeopardize Israel's security because of the deal, because in every generation we had to fight. And the war against Gaza and Hamas and radical Islamism is not over. Unfortunately and sadly, it will have more chapters. In 150 years of Israeli-Arab/Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there has not been one day in which our enemies truly and genuinely and authentically accepted our right to exist in peace and security. That's an historical fact. It's not a political opinion. It's an historical fact. Think about it. You've seen an American peace plan for peace in the Middle East. You've seen that, right? Bill Clinton, 2000. You've seen an Israeli peace plan. Ehud Olmert, 2008, offered them 100% of the territory. You've seen a British peace plan, 1937, the Peel Commission. You've seen a United Nations peace plan, the Partition Plan, November 1947. And I've seen and I've witnessed many attempts by European countries. Let me ask you, have you ever seen a Palestinian peace plan? You haven't. You know why? It doesn't exist. They're not interested. They believe in what we call zero-sum diplomacy, all or nothing. Either we get everything that we want, or we want nothing. Well, at least theoretically speaking, when you say all or nothing, you take the risk of 50% nothing. That's a big risk. You don't invest in the stock market based on 50% nothing. You would never do any deal in your life with 50% nothing. But that's what they chose. It's called zero-sum diplomacy. And it brought them nothing so far. If you want to hear a beautiful explanation of that in front of a very hostile audience, watch Bill Clinton rallying for VP Harris in Dearborn, Michigan, addressing a bunch of ignorant young people and telling them the truth. Watch it. It's a 15-minute video. And the truth is hard for them to accept. But he's basically telling them what I just told you. How Arafat lied to him and didn't accept the deal that he put on the table. And he said if the Palestinians were truly about a Palestinian state, they could have had one 25 years ago. But it was never about Palestinian state. It was always about the Jewish state. You have to remember that. It was never about the Palestinian state. It was always about their negation of the idea of a Jewish state. That's the real story. And it's not a political statement, it's an historical fact. All right, now we have more questions coming in from the audience.
I've been watching TV for 8 to 10 hours a day since October 7. And I don't understand several things. And maybe you have some answers. First, I make a couple of comments. I was born in Israel 73 years ago. It's my birthday this week.
God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I've been observing every day some Palestinian creating violence, killing himself or killing other people. And I came to New York penniless, and I never wanted to leave. I slept in Center Park, I was in a shelter, and I live the American dream now. And what I don't understand, that it's very clear to me that after 9/11, I had a baby, and my wife moved to the country, and I had a lot of things to think about. How do we make peace? And I came to the answer that we need not United Nations, but united religion. It's a religious war. And I wrote a letter to New York Times. Tom Friedman came to meet with me. We had a long conversation. He never published it. I don't know why. I find New York Times to be one-sided and anti-Semite, and I don't like it, and they never published it. But I expressed myself very clearly that we need, it's a religious war, and we need united religion. The religious leaders of the world going to get together, and they're going to make decision, and everybody will follow. Yeah, I got a couple of questions. Yeah, so I wanted to express myself about united religion, because I grew up in Israel, I was in Iran, and I arrived to the conclusion that it's a religious war. The Muslims believe killing Jews, you go to heaven, or they get killed, they go to heaven with 70 virgins, whatever the story is. And they can't solve it without religious leaders. So my question is, one was at 7th of October, when they been attacked, Israel, and brutally was attacked. They did things that's humanly impossible to do. Why it took 8 hours for Israelis army to react? A. B. Why they did such brutal stuff? That's not what they learn in school. In school, they learn to hit at babies, to kill Jews, and to hate Jews, whatever religious Muslim teaches them.
Right. So I have 3 comments. The first about whether it's a religious war or not. I don't believe that all Muslims or all Christians or all Jews are the same. There are certainly elements within Islam that are radical, that their plan is to deploy Islam as a mean to achieve political and military goals. And you see that with ISIS, you see that with Al-Qaeda, you see that with Hamas and Hezbollah and so on. And we need to fight them. We need to fight them because, as I mentioned before, the enemy is us, modernity. They hate Israel not because of Israeli policies as much as because of what Israel stands for. Israel stands for freedom, and in Israel, anyone can vote, anyone can succeed, anyone can, despite of the rumors that Israel is an apartheid state, it's not. And so that's the first. The second question, why it took the army so long to get? Well, the army unfortunately developed an unhealthy addiction to technology. Once the enemy was able to take down the technology, meaning the eyes and the sensors that we had, then they also were able to break the chain of command. And it took, the army was in disarray. We will have to learn more, and that's why we need an independent investigation of what happened on 10/7. The army cannot investigate itself, although they do, and I trust them that they do a decent job investigating themselves, but you always want to have external people investigating such a calamity. But those things happen. It happened to the United States on 9/11, it happened to you on Pearl Harbor, it happened to the French in World War II. We call this strategic surprises. It happened to us in October '73. Unfortunately, things like that happen. They shouldn't happen, and we need to learn from them. And regarding your third question was about, remind me, what was the third question? So you said about the religion, about what happened to the army? Oh, why Hamas was so, yeah. So that's an interesting question because, even the Nazis, they never recorded. I mean, they kept logs of everything they did, but we don't have footage of the Nazis killing people in the gas chambers. Theoretically, they could have put a camera in there, but they didn't. And they didn't because they were not proud of that. Hamas did what they did, incomprehensible brutality, pre-civilizational brutality. What does it mean, pre-civilizational brutality? You can't really have a civilized society when people behave like that. It was meant to do 2 things in my view. The first is to humiliate us, particularly the element about women. I don't want to share with you graphic details of what I saw in the videos that Hamas uploaded on October 7th, October 8th, and October 9th. What they did to women. And they recorded it. I don't want to share that with you. So women were always used in wars throughout history as a way to humiliate the enemy. We captured your women, we tortured your women, we raped your women, we humiliated you by extension. But the second reason they did all of that, I believe, is they wanted us to respond to them on the same level. They wanted to bring us down to their level. That's why, and we know that for a fact, that's why they were drugged. I spoke to someone who, an amazing young man, maybe we should bring him here, the mayor of Chatzor HaGlilit in the Upper Galilee, His name is Michael Cabeza, and he himself is an officer in an elite reserve unit, and the day of October 7th, as he was running to become the mayor in the middle of the campaign, he drove down to the south and he participated in the battle over Kibbutz Be'eri the whole day until the next morning, until the morning of October 8th. And he told me that it was like, he said, you won't believe the Palestinians where we got tired, we needed to eat, we needed to drink. He said they didn't. It was like a robot, like a machine. And it was because of the drugs. They were induced by drugs. And he said they didn't get tired. You shoot them, they come up again, and they continue. Nothing breaks them because of the drugs. And so I believe that was the main reason to do it, to humiliate us and to make sure that we respond on the same level, because their idea was that the Western civilization will respond very harshly to Israeli military response, as we know actually happened. So in that regard, their plan was successful.
Notwithstanding the enormously difficult road to get there, do you believe, if possible, it would be desirable to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza?
Excellent question. So the question was if it's desirable to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. I think that the whole discussion about Palestinian statehood, in the sense that Palestine will be independent like Canada is independent or like Mexico is independent, is not going to happen. Why? Because 10-7 convinced Israelis beyond any doubt, and even Israelis on the far left would agree with that the conflict is not about territory. We thought the conflict was about territory. And if the conflict was indeed about territory, then there was a territorial bargain to be achieved. But 10-7 convinced all of us that it's not about territory. It's about their opposition to our right to exist. So the unfinished business is not 67. The unfinished business is 48. That's the story. So, however, you have millions of Palestinians. What are you going to do with them? They're not going anywhere. So you have to be practical. This is what I think Trump has in mind. To come up with some livable arrangement that will give them maximum autonomy and us maximum security. How will that arrangement will look like? It's hard to predict. I think it will involve Palestinian autonomy to run their own lives, but external security will be controlled by other elements, possibly an international force, maybe Israel, maybe. It's very difficult, because who wants to go into Gaza? If you're Canada, if you're Australia, if you're the United States, who wants to send their soldiers to Gaza now? Nobody. If you're Saudi Arabia, if you're Egypt, look at the Egyptians. They're keeping a safe distance from Gaza. Although Gaza should have been their problem as much as it is our problem. They share a border with Gaza too, but they couldn't care less. They're not being attacked by Hamas. We're being attacked by Hamas. So I think it's the reality that we have to come up with some sort of a livable arrangement that will allow the Palestinians to run their own lives, and we will even help them in the process of building their own court system and building an effective police system and build an effective healthcare system and so on. Right now, parts of Gaza will have to be physically rebuilt because they're destroyed physically, very much like other places that you know from history, like Dresden or like Tokyo after World War II, or the Dahia neighborhood of Beirut after the Second Lebanon War. They rebuilt it. They had to rebuild the whole thing. And so they will need to rebuild Gaza. Who will do that? Probably people from the Arab world, maybe from the Gulf countries. There's a lot of business to be made there. People need where to live, people need housing. But we will need to reform the whole system. So yeah, to your question, I think it's viable. Don't expect anything, peace in the Western civilization sense of it. Peace in the Middle East means normalization, non-belligerency. Let me put it this way. Peace between Israelis and Palestinians will mean non-belligerency, but not like, nothing rosy. Yes, Stuart, please.
So, two perhaps related questions about the recent agreement between for the hostage release. On the Israeli side, you have an agreement that was, at least according to the Biden administration, was on the table since May, more or less. It was from May until mid-January, the Prime Minister said it was unacceptable, or at least it wasn't acceptable enough that he accepted it. Then suddenly in January it became acceptable, and it's now been in the process of being implemented. But in the meantime, quite a number of hostages were killed. Quite a number of Israeli soldiers were killed, and so on and so forth. The war continued, not to mention Palestinian casualties and continued damage to Israel's image. On the American side, you have kind of the opposite of what happened with Afghanistan, where Trump negotiated a bad agreement with the Taliban and then dumped it on Biden to implement, which he implemented badly and severely damaged his reputation and his presidency. You now have perhaps an equally unimplementable three-stage agreement, which most people say, at least the people that I talk to, it's unlikely we'll ever get to phase two, which is now owned by Trump. And so the question is what will be the effects in Israel, if any, of the first situation, and what do you think Trump will do to deal with the second part of the question?
So I think that Trump holds the key. So as I said in my opening remarks, if he will indeed introduce an ambitious deal, what he calls the mega deal, that will include Saudi Arabia, normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, I don't think, unless the Israeli opposition provides the current coalition with a safety net, with a parliamentary safety net, I don't think the government can survive this. The elements within the government will not be willing to accept it, and I don't think that it's going to happen. What will happen to the second part of the deal? I don't know. I think that Trump will try to have the Iranians use the fact that the Iranians take advantage of the fact that the Iranians are very weak now. They were badly defeated. And this is a great opportunity to introduce a new deal vis-a-vis Iran, a deal that guarantees normalization with the Saudis and some political horizon for the Palestinians. I think that's the Trump plan. I think it's within reach. If the second phase of the hostage deal with Hamas doesn't happen, I don't think that Trump will be damaged. I think that on the contrary, he's being viewed, despite of the fact that the deal took place during the last days of Mr. Biden in the White House, Mr. Trump is being viewed, at least by most Israelis, as the extra factor that made the deal possible. So he gets credit for that deal. Whether he likes it or not, he gets credit for it. Let's hope that the second phase does happen and that we see all the hostages back home. I think it's, as I mentioned before, I think it's critical for Israel's future and Israel's ability to prosper, because without that, we're going to see mass migration of young people. Brain drain like we've never seen before if this doesn't happen. That's why it's so important.
Were you surprised by the explosion of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and throughout the world immediately after October 7th? And what do you think can be done to meet that?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for this question. So, no, I was not surprised. I was surprised at the weak response of the American society and particularly university administrators, which was shocking to me to see the ineptness of university administrators throughout the country. But I was not surprised at all, because I was here in 9/11. I mean, maybe you didn't pay attention, but the same voices that don't think Israel has a right to exist also think that America deserved 9/11. Same people. And you find them in social studies and the humanities until this very day in leading universities. Here's the story. Post-World War II, World War II was a mega trauma to humanity. We have to understand, 60 million people died. 1/3 of the Jewish people was exterminated in an industrial fashion, never known to civilization beforehand. 25 million Russians died, something we don't talk about. 25 million Russians died. The entire German civilization was wiped out. The Japanese civilization had to be rebuilt. It was a massive trauma. And think about it, 60 million when the world population is 2.5 billion. So it's not like today when you have 7.5 billion. So the world responded by creating the United Nations, was founded in 1945 in San Francisco, which was a big promise in the beginning. 1945, 51 members, founding members of the United Nations. Shortly, it became 55 members. By the time Israel becomes a member, the United Nations almost 60 members. Today, 193 members. 2/3 of them are tyrannies, not democracies. The United States is the most hated country in the United Nations. But philosophically, there's a school of thought emerging in Europe, especially in France, but also in Germany, that is saying we, as a result of the trauma, we need to show compassion. And philosophically, Jean-Paul Sartre, who is a French existentialist, said something that makes a lot of sense. He said, if you want to understand the world, you have to look at the world from the eyes of the underdog, of the weak in our society. And it made perfect sense, following the horrors of World War II. And a lot of people subscribe to that worldview. And human rights became a new religion almost. And Western, liberal, pluralistic democracies championed the idea of we need to be compassionate to the weak in society. That's a wonderful idea. But somehow along the way, when the idea traveled from France to America, some people, I'd like to believe that they are not as sophisticated in their understanding of the world, added a little twist to the salt notion of let's see the world from the eyes of the underdog. And that little twist was, and that's what you're seeing today, is the notion that because the underdog is weak, because the underdog is suffering, the underdog is always right. And the underdog is not accountable for their actions. Now, if you believe that the underdog is always right, then you understand what's happening on campus today. These people don't really care about facts, justice. Famous social psychologist from NYU, Jonathan Haidt, calls it concept creep. Concept creep, when a good idea slowly becomes a bad idea. You know, Donald Trump waged war against the DEI apparatus. I don't know if he will succeed, but what bothers people, and I think that opposition to DEI, to the current definition of DEI, is one of the reasons he's back in the White House, if you ask me. What bothers people? That inclusion is a great idea. That's what made America so great. But some people exclude in the name of inclusion. Take what's his name, this Ta-Nehisi Coates. I never heard of him before he wrote this book. Apparently he's a very famous writer in America. He went to the West Bank for 10 days before 10/7, produced a book about the Palestinians in which he basically says Israel doesn't have a right to exist. He has no problem with Germany that caused 2 world wars More damage than any other civilization in history was inflicted on us by the Germans. No problem. Germany can have its own state. Bashar Assad killed 600,000 of his own people. It doesn't bother Ta-Nehisi Coates. Iran is killing women for not wearing a scarf. 2,800 Iranians are being killed by their own governments with no trial every year, but Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates never heard about that. He's bothered with Israel that offered the Palestinians time and again compromises that they rejected. That's what bothers him. Now let me tell you something. A discriminatory singling out of a group because of its identity has a name. How do you call that? Racism and anti-Semitism, yes. Ta-Nehisi Coates is an anti-Semite and a racist. And yet, he's being taught in every university in America. And his books are recommended. This bigot, his books are recommended. That's what happened in America. Concept creep. In the name of inclusion, I exclude the Jews. By the way, my prediction, because I'm familiar with Jewish history in this country, the Jews will prevail because they always do. What happened 150 years ago when Jews were excluded from country clubs? You know, have you ever heard of Hillcrest Country Club in Beverly Hills? Hillcrest was founded by Jews who were not accepted to Bel Air Country Club. Go and look who are the members of Hillcrest today and compare it to Bel Air. Jewish hospitals were created and became very quickly the best hospitals in the country. And I can go on and on and on. And they will exclude us. Just came back from Miami. They had the Jewish festival in Miami. Let me tell you, amazing movies. If they will exclude us from festivals, our festivals will become the best. If they will exclude us from universities, our institutions will become the best. You know, I'm teaching now at Touro University. Many of you are familiar with Touro. What you don't know about Touro is that Touro has 22,000 students, 70% of them not Jewish. 70%. Touro today provides 4% of the total number of new doctors to the American healthcare system. And my projection is, within several years, Touro will become #1 in healthcare in this country. It's a Jewish university. I can go on and on and on. They will try to exclude the Jews, and the Jews will excel, as they always do. And they'll create their own standard, as they always do. And that's my prediction. So that's what you're seeing. By the way, again, it's not about Israel. You have to remember that. It's about America. Say there's a link between the people that think that the underdog has a right to steal, right? I was shocked. I have not been to New York in a couple of years, and I was shocked when I walked into Duane Reade and I see that most of the products are now behind, they're locked up. Why is it happening? It's the same thing, same idea. The underdog is not accountable. Now, I don't think you can build a healthy, prosperous society like that. And I think that's one of the reasons Donald Trump is back in the White House, if you ask me. That's my opinion. But yeah, you will find, by the way, I just want to say about those who don't think Israel has a right to exist, thankfully, it's a tiny minority. The problem that we have is that there's a huge majority of Americans that find it very difficult to relate to Israel. That's the challenge. How do you allow people to develop a relationship with Israel? Israel doesn't have to be perfect. New York is not perfect. New York has so many problems, but Israelis love New York. They're deeply connected to New York. The day of 9/11, millions of Israelis were sitting in front of their TV, crying and sobbing. Why? Because they love New York with all of its problems. We can do the same thing with Israel. It will take a lot of work, but we can do the same thing with Israel. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering if you could please provide some analysis and insight on the eruption of fighting that we're seeing right now in the West Bank and how it relates to the whole big picture. Like, was it inevitable and it was always going to go that way, or is it a direct result of 10/7 and its aftermath? Like, and we were sort of had reached a turning point, and now this seems to be like, is it the last front that has to happen, or is it something else?
Excellent question. So the Ring of Fire scenario that the Iranians had in mind didn't happen. The Ring of Fire envisioned Hamas attacking on 10/7, Hezbollah joining, that happened. Pro-Iranian militias attacking the Golan Heights, Hamas or pro-Iranian groups in the West Bank attacking Israelis, Israeli Arabs, the Houthis. Here you have 6, 7, 8 fronts simultaneously. It didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen, in my view, has a lot to do with the videos that Hamas uploaded. The brutality was not just against Jews. There was a thing that Hamas did that I call guilt by association. They killed with the same brutality Thai workers that happened to be there, but more importantly for our discussion, Muslims. They killed Muslims. Why? Because they dared to work for the Jews. The festival, Nova Music Festival, because it was on the Sabbath, many Jews don't work on the Sabbath. So they had to hire Arab Israelis. So all the catering and all the logistics, all the drivers, they were all Arab Israelis. Some of them were Bedouins, Arab Israelis. They captured them, they tortured them, some of it on video. I saw one of those videos myself, where they thought they interrogated an Arab Israeli, asking questions about the Quran. He was begging for his life. They shot him and walked away. I saw it from a body cam. They uploaded it. They thought they killed him. They didn't. He survived. But he survived to tell his story. And everybody saw the video in Arabic. Hundreds of millions of Muslims saw that video. It's one of the reasons the response to 10/7 among Arab Israelis and in the West Bank was so, to Israel's response to 10/7 was so mild. So what you're seeing today is part of what I believe to be routine operations of the Israeli Defense Forces against what they identify as terrorist threats emanating from the West Bank. I don't think this would escalate into a full-blown war like we had in, during the Second Intifada. Second Intifada started in the fall of 2000 and ended with the pullout from Gaza. So it was about 4 or 5 years during which 1,400 Israelis were killed, 70% of them civilians, which is something, again, not a lot of people talk about. So to your question, I don't think it would escalate, and I certainly hope not. And I have time for one last question. Yes, please, right there. So I was asked if there are any names of people that I would recommend for you to follow, and you use the term statesman. And again, what makes a person a statesman or a stateswoman? I believe it's the distance. The distance allows what we call mystification. When you see the movie The Darkest Hour about Winston Churchill, actually we had his granddaughter right here to talk about her grandfather, and she said that she watched the movie 5 times. And I asked her, why did you watch the movie so many times? And she said, because he was so accurate. So think about the Winston Churchill that we saw in the movie. Remember, have you seen the movie? Do you remember what time he usually used to wake up in the morning? Actually morning, it would be an exaggeration to call it the morning. He would wake up at 1:30 p.m. What's the first thing he would do in the morning? Light a cigar and drink whiskey. And he would spend most of the day in his pajamas. So in our world today, we call that a dysfunctional person, right? Yet we recall Winston Churchill as one of the greatest leaders in history, right? Why? Because of the speeches he made. But we really did not know much about him. So if Winston Churchill was alive today, I would bet you wouldn't admire him like you admire him today. It's impossible. Technology is killing statesmanship. The disappearance of the distance is killing it, right? So there are no more statesmen, there are no more stateswomen, there are no more king philosophers. So who are the names of the people that you want to follow in Israel? So according to public opinion surveys, a joint Bennett-Lieberman ticket could win the next elections. So here are two names, Naftali Bennett and Avigdor Lieberman. Naftali Bennett is a former prime minister, former minister of education, former minister of the economy, served as the prime minister a little bit over a year, and there's a consensus in Israel that he did a pretty good job running the government, but he did a lousy job as a politician keeping his party intact, and the small party that he brought into the Knesset, he couldn't keep them intact, which means he doesn't have the political skill that, for example, someone like Mr. Netanyahu has. Lieberman will be the adult in the room, probably, so I urge you to watch him. He was my boss, my direct boss, so he appointed me to be Consul General in New York, so I can't say anything bad about Lieberman. I owe him a big one. Who else? Benny Gantz is always a good option, is a former general. Served as Minister of Defense, was Prime Minister alternate until Mr. Netanyahu broke the deal that he had with him. What I think is interesting about the brand that Mr. Gantz is trying to promote, and I just heard him in Miami last week, is that he insists on being a clean politician. I don't know if it's possible to be a clean politician, never to lie, to be honest, to try to live up to your promises. I don't know if it's possible. I hope he succeeds, but he's a good person to follow. Another rising star, again, a former general, is Yair Golan, is the new head of labor. I served with him in the army. I know him personally. He's a great guy. Never undermine Mr. Netanyahu himself, so I would watch him very carefully, watch him and see what he's doing. Within Likud or the Israeli right, I would say, watch Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir, who just resigned from the government, is the head of the most radical faction in the Israeli parliament. I think the reason why he resigned is because he senses the Israeli far-right sentiment and he wants to capitalize on it. And I think that in the next elections, he will probably gain significantly more than he has now. That's my guess, at the expense of Likud and the ultra-Orthodox parties. Many of the voters that vote for him are young ultra-Orthodox men. It's very interesting, very interesting. Young ultra-Orthodox men. That's his new constituency. And so I think he is probably going to grow significantly in the next elections. From within Likud, I don't see any serious challenger for Mr. Netanyahu, unless something unforeseeable will happen health-wise. There's some talks about Mr. Netanyahu's declining health. I don't know. I don't have any information, but people are talking about it. So I don't know if it's true. But look for Gilad Erdan, as a former ambassador to the United Nations. He was here during 10/7. The public perception is that he was not tainted with the calamity of 10/7, so maybe he's in a good position to inherit Mr. Netanyahu in Likud. I'm not sure we know how Likud will emerge post 10/7, if it will be the same Likud. It's certainly not Likud of today. It's not the Likud of Menachem Begin, for sure. It's an entirely different party. But given that the public opinion surveys are not really wrong, not dramatically wrong, I think you will see a new political configuration. Thank you so much. I hope to see you all next month. It's been a pleasure.